evening, everyone, wherever you may be. My name is Nick Pigeon. I'm Head of Surveys and Benchmarking at iGraduate. I'm joined by my colleagues who will be positioned somewhere on your screen. For me, they're in the top left and the bottom left. Robin Hallows and Melissa Oliver. We're going to share the presentation between us, although it may not initially seem like that because I'm going to be doing the first bit. So you'll be very tired of my voice in about 15 minutes time when I eventually shut up. The first thing I must say is that up there on the top floor of my house is my recently awoken 3-year-old daughter. So in the next 5 minutes at some point, you will see her and my wife come down. Once they're through, we're done and there shouldn't be any more distractions. But I have to make this disclaimer from time to time. Right then, let me share the screen and we will crack on. Robin, if you could give me a shout when this appears, I would appreciate it.
Yep, all good.
Okay, good man, thank you for that. I'll just tinker with my video so that goes away. Right, okay. Like I say, I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes. The session in total, our talking bit is going to be probably 35 minutes-ish. We'll have time for questions and answers at the end. However, if you have a burning question that comes to mind at a certain point during the presentation, then please just type it in the chat box. And whoever isn't talking, so at the moment, Robin and Mel, they will be keeping an eye on that. And if it's a question they can easily answer without interrupting the flow, then they will do so in the chat. If it's something that is worth interrupting, either me or whoever's talking at that particular point in the session, then they'll interrupt and we'll have a discussion there and then. With all that said, let's crack on. A brief outline of the session. I'm going to talk a bit about iGraduate and who we are. I'm then going to take you through some of the reporting that you get from your participation in the Student Barometer survey, those deliverables that you've probably seen, like the ranking sheet and the pivot table, just to give you a few hints and tips as to how you might best use that reporting. Then I'll hand over to Mel, who's going to tell you all about some of the wonderful things that are hopefully coming your way in 2021. Robin will take you through an overview of some of the results of a survey we ran earlier in the year on institutional response to COVID-19. And then, as I say, at the end, there'll be time for questions. Okay, so the About Us bit then. Essentially, I have responsibility for the day-to-day running of 2 businesses. One is iGraduate, who run the Student Barometer, and then the other bit of our business is a financial benchmarking business. Taking the iGraduate bit first of all, well, since iGraduate's inception in around 2005, we've gathered feedback from over 3 million students in over 1,400 universities across 33 countries. So there isn't a great deal about student opinion and student experience that we don't understand in depth. Our flagship core survey is the Student Barometer. Each year we have a global benchmark of around 125,000 plus responses. Some years that's actually closer to 200,000. It depends which institutions participate in that particular year. In particular, sometimes we have the Southern Hemisphere, namely Australia and New Zealand, in. Some years they're out. So the global benchmark of student responses fluctuates somewhere between 125,000 and 200,000. The ICE institutions ordinarily contribute around 10,000 responses to that global benchmark. That was a bit lower in 2020 for pandemic-related reasons, but that's about the level of your sort of contribution to the benchmark. The point I'm telling you all these numbers, the reason I'm telling you all these numbers is that it's a really big, credible data set, and the ICE institutions get to compare your student experience against the global benchmark averages of all participating institutions and against the ICE institutions. What the Student Barometer does is it tells you what your students think about all aspects of the student experience, and it enables you to improve things for those students. So we ask a whole heap of questions about the arrival experience, the living experience, the learning experience, those support functions that help the students day to day, and a few other bits and bobs around careers and all that kind of stuff. I said that that's one bit of the business that I look after. The other bit that I look after is financial benchmarking. I'll tell you this just in passing, really, but that looks at how institutions and universities worldwide spend their money. So when we bring those two data sets together, we have student experience on the one hand, what things cost on the other hand, and we're able to tell institutions, well, your students don't think much of your student services operation, but it's costing you above the average. So it gives a really rich data set to help universities and educational institutions improve. A little bit about the main people that work on the ICE Student Barometer Survey. I mean, I feel a bit of a fraud being on this slide. I wish I could take any of the credit for the work we do, but I can't really. I just sort of sit at the top and let Robin, Mel and Peter do all the hard work that brings you the survey. Just describing the roles that Robin, Mel and Peter fulfill though. Robin sort of takes an operational overview of the survey. He does, he's in regular contact with Craig, Jane, and Elise. Mel does the day-to-day sort of really hard work liaising with the ICE and getting those deliverables out to you. And Peter, who isn't on the call today, he's our technical whiz behind the scenes. So anything to do with spitting all the numbers out and the database behind that, that's his area of expertise. If one of you asks a particularly difficult technical question, we may well park it and take some details and come back to you once we've consulted with Peter. So, understanding the data. I'm going to spend probably 7 or 8 minutes giving you an overview of some of the examples of the reporting. All the reporting I'm about to show you is using example data. So there's nothing real in here, but it will enable me to give you a good flavour of how to use the reporting. I can't hope in the time we've got to look at every single bit of every type of the reports that are available to you. But as I said before, hopefully I can give you some useful pointers about how to interpret the data and how to investigate the results in detail. Okay, the first of these, and I hope you can see the screen okay, and there's quite a lot of numbers on here, so feel free to zoom in to your own level of preference, but I will sort of point around the screen. Robin or Mel, can you see my cursor?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Thank you, Mel. That's great, because I'm going to be pointing at stuff. Okay, so the first of the reporting deliverables that I'll take you through is the ranking sheet. And what this allows you to see is for each question in the survey, and this is just an excerpt, just looking at the arrival section of the survey, that there's 3 and a bit other sections as well. For each question within the survey, this allows you to see the percentage of students who are satisfied or very satisfied with that particular question. There's a 4-point score, so it ranges from very dissatisfied, dissatisfied, satisfied, very satisfied. This allows you to see the percentage of students who are in those top 2 boxes, satisfied or very satisfied. That's the percentage scores that you see over here, and I will walk you through an example in a bit more detail shortly. And then over on the right, in the coloured bits, red, amber, green colour coding, you can see how your institution ranks against each of the benchmarks. So let's take an example. This question here, study sense. This is the short form of a question which actually is asking students on arrival, how satisfied were you with your understanding of how your program study would work? So have they had some good information sent out to them? Do they know what's going to happen with their program of study? We shorten that to study sense essentially so it just fits on the page. And we can see that for this particular example institution, 97.6% of students were satisfied or very satisfied with study sense, compared to 88.9% in the global ISBSB benchmark. Silly title, it's basically the average of all institutions participating in the survey, and 90.1% in the ICE benchmark. So that's a really good result for the example institution. 97.6% of students satisfied or very satisfied, which is higher than both of the main benchmarks. Over to the colourful bit on the right, and you can see that for study sense, against the global benchmark and against the ICE benchmark, the example institution ranks second. As I say, the colour coding in the ranking bit is red, amber, green. It's slightly toned down colours, but a result of second gives you a very dark green because it's a really good result. A quick canter through some of the other numbers on this slide. You've got the benchmarks here. You've got the variance to benchmark, percentage point variance here. You've got some numbers about number of responses in each of the benchmarks up there. So for example, in the main benchmark, 106,510 responses. Over here, you've got how many institutions submitted enough responses to generate a ranking for that particular question. So they vary a bit, but by and large, the global benchmark has sort of around 54 institutions in it, and the ICE benchmark around kind of 13. So institutions. The final number to draw your attention to on this slide is what we call the P value. This is a very much a Peter area of expertise, so I won't pretend to try to take you through it in any level of detail, but it's a bit of statistical witchcraft, essentially. What you need to understand is that if the P value is 0.05 or less, then that result is likely to be true. Yeah, so it's less likely to be a chance of a statistical error causing the result. So if you've got one of these lovely low numbers, it's good stuff. You can pay attention to that result. If they're a little bit higher, then there's a little bit more margin for error there. Okay, on to the next bit of reporting, we call the ranking grid. And where the ranking sheet that we just looked at shows percentage of students satisfied or very satisfied on a 4-point scale, then the ranking grid shows the average of the respondents' scores from 1 to 4, from dissatisfied through to very satisfied. So taking study sense again, you can see that the blue highlighted one, the example institution, average score is 3.44 on a 4-point scale. We'd expect that because we saw that by and large lots of students were very happy with things. So an average of 3.44, and it's second from left to right, so it's ranked second against the ICE benchmark. The top one's average score of 3.64. Where I think the ranking grid is actually really useful as an extra bit of insight is to explore how bunched or spread out the results are. So, I mean, if you look at registration at the top, with the exception of the top two, with an average score of 3.48 and 3.43, the remaining 10 institutions, 10 or 11 institutions, all the results are spread between 3.25 and 3.34, so it's actually quite tightly bunched. And sometimes you can be a little bit, surprisingly low on your ranking, even though you've got a result that's very close to the top results, and that's because the results are actually very close together. So it's just worth noting that. Another bit of the reporting that you get is called the summary sheet. What this displays is basically the same information as the ranking grid that we just looked at, but just in a slightly more easy to digest format. So you've got your average scores for the example institution, a couple of benchmarks and some percentage variances. A couple of things to highlight though. The color coding within each cell. If you've got a fuller green bar, then that means you're doing better on that result, essentially. You're closer to the top of the rankings. The other thing to note is you may occasionally see a NSV in a cell, which stands for not statistically valid. Basically, if you've got fewer than 10 responses in your institution, then that's what you'll see there, because if there's fewer than 10 responses, then you can't sort of put any sort of validity on those responses. If you get between 10 and 30 responses, it will appear on the summary sheet, but it won't appear on the ranking grid. It's just us protecting the credibility of the comparative data and making sure that we've got enough responses to draw some conclusions from. The second to last bit of reporting that I'll talk you through is the pivot table. So this is my artist's impression of it. I will show you an actual pivot table in a minute and try and walk you through it. The pivot table is essentially all your student response data in a big Excel file, and we've built some pivot tables that are sort of pre-made, ready for you to start to interrogate the data. It is definitely the most comprehensive bit of reporting that we give you. It is great for people who are good at pivot tables. It is not so great for people who aren't good at pivot tables, and I would include myself, even though I'm doing the example, I would include myself in that. So whenever anyone asks me to sort of give some hints and tips on the pivot table. My first piece of advice is find a colleague who's good at pivot tables first, if you aren't, because they will definitely help you. That said, I will now attempt to just give you a bit of a flavour as to how it works and a bit of an insight into the kind of value that it gives you. Bear with me while I switch file. Okay, Robin, Mel, if you can tell me when the Excel file pops up, that would be great.
Yeah, I can see it.
Thank you very much. Right, okay, so you can see that you've got a number of different tabs. There's some instructions here. There's a few sort of other bits and bobs, the long form of the questions, understanding how my program of study would work, the study sense question we've been working through, and all your data on this tab. So we've been looking at study sense, and we remember that we had 97.6% of students who were satisfied or very satisfied with study sense, and that was an average score of 3.44. So highlighting the column with study sense, you can see at the bottom here, it's very small, but you've got an average of 3.444444 there. So just demonstrating that it all ties back. If we go to the pivot table itself, I'll start to show you how that can break down. So typing into the key, that's all you do. You just find the question that you want, and the data key tab gives you the long forms of the questions. Tick that and it will automatically put it into the table. I mean, that's not very interesting so far, but it will be in a minute. What that tells us is of all the scores that were submitted by students, so 3s, 4s, I think there's 1 as well. If you add all those up, then it adds up to 144. That's not that much use actually, because you don't want to know what it all adds up to. You want to know how many students have said 4, very satisfied, how many students have said 3. So you right click anywhere in the pivot table, value field settings, change it to count. You don't need to understand it, you just need to do it. That's what I do. And that tells us that we've got 42 responses. So whether they're dissatisfied, very satisfied, or whatever, there's 42 responses. What we then want to do is start to look at that in more detail. So drag the question down into the rows bit, and that starts to show a breakdown of our responses. So 1 student gave it a very dissatisfied, 21 students satisfied, 20 students very satisfied. Let's change that so it's a bit more useful. Value field settings again, show values as percentage of column total. And you can see that the 3s and 4s, the satisfieds and the very satisfieds, highlight them, sum it up, 97.6%, which is what we saw on the ranking sheet. But you might want to interrogate that, and this is where it gets more interesting in truth. Let's find out what international or domestic students think. So I've found a filter within the pivot table fields. Currently it's appearing in rows, which isn't a particularly useful way of displaying the data. Let's drag international or domestic up into columns. And then you can start to see how things break down in more detail. So where for all students, 50% were in the satisfied box, we can see that for international students, actually 66.6% were in the satisfied box and only 33 in the very satisfied, which is different to domestic students and different to your overall average. So it just gives you a flavour of how you can start to break the data down. I was going to show you another one, but you know what, I'm a bit conscious of time. So I'm going to just go back and show you the final bit of reporting. If I can see my PowerPoint show, which seems to have vanished, which isn't particularly helpful. Bear with me a sec. I will just have to scoot back through. Oh, there we are. Robin, Mel, what can you see? Is it the pivot table slide?
Yep.
It is, yeah.
Cool. And now on the open comments?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, good. Final bit of reporting, then I'll shut up. I said you'd get bored of my voice. You also get a big file, which gives you what we call all the open free text comments. So some of the questions give students the opportunity to type their thoughts and give their genuine opinion in a free text format. This is what it looks like. At the top, you can put all sorts of kind of keywords in to find different text strings within the comments. It's quite a fancy bit of technology behind the Excel file. But quite honestly, if I'm giving you a hint on tip on how to use the open comments file, just look through it. put a filter on for non-blank comments in each of the arrival and the learning sections, and have a good look through. When I'm preparing presentations, that's how I do it. You can quite quickly start to get a flavour of the key themes that come out, and I think there's real value in looking at the comments in detail. Right, that is enough from me. I will hand over to Mel. I will stop my share, Mel, and then you can take it over.
Great, thank you. Okay, Nick, Robin, can you see my screen?
I certainly can, thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to speak about potential service enhancements for next year. So we've implemented a secure online portal called InTouch, which has basically really streamlined the survey administration process from start to finish. I'm going to briefly cover the key features of InTouch and what the portal allows you to do. So firstly, you'll receive an email inviting you to confirm your account and to create a password. And once a password has been created, you can log into the self-service page, which looks like this. So this is the self-service screen where you can submit your terminology change form and preload data if this is something that your institution has opted for. So the terminology change form essentially allows you to personalize your survey. And to start completing your TCF, just click View, and this will show the different categories you can personalize for your institution. So on the Introduction tab, you can insert prize text if you're planning on offering an incentive to students. We see about a 10% increase in response rates when a prize is offered, so this is something we would definitely recommend doing. You can provide a wellbeing contact so that students know who to contact if they have an issue with their wellbeing, and you can add in your student population data so that you can monitor your response rates when the survey is live, which I'll speak a bit more about shortly. Within the TCF, there is also the option of adding in additional questions specific to your institution at an additional cost. So we've added some optional modules to the survey to allow additional flexibility on survey content. For example, you can add a module on future plans or a module on the COVID-19 response, which Robin will be talking you through shortly. And you can add or remove any of the optional question blocks based on your institution preferences. If your institution has specific terminology, for example, if the health centre is called the medical centre, or if the counselling service is called the wellbeing team, the TCF can incorporate these changes. And once all of the tabs have been completed and you're happy with your personalisations, just click Submit for Approval in the top right-hand corner. Your account manager, so me, will be notified by email that you have submitted your TCF, and you'll then receive email notifications from InTouch when various items are approved or rejected. We've also implemented an instructional PDF and an instructional video on the InTouch portal, which provides a bit more in-depth guide to each individual element of the TCF. So moving on to preloading. Preloading allows institutions to pre-populate students' demographic data. This includes things like students' date of birth, gender, course level and year of study. If preloading is something that is possible for your institution, we would recommend implementing it. Preloading can shorten the survey by up to 30%, so it can really improve your response rates and it increases the accuracy of the data captured. So to download the preload template, you just click Download Template in the top right. And once you've opened the template, there's an Instructions tab where you'll find guidance on how to complete the preload data file. And once you've filled this in, you can just navigate back to the self-service screen here and you'll be able to click Upload next to the data upload task. Again, we provide a PDF preload guide with a lot more information on how to fill in your student data file. Basically, the only compulsory fields are student ID and student email, and then there are a variety of optional fields such as student nationality, study level, and study area. So when your survey is live, you can use InTouch for monitoring your response rates. Some filters are dependent on whether you have opted for preloading. So the orange vertical lines on responses collected per day represent reminders being sent out, and the orange horizontal line could show criteria for inclusion in rankings. We can provide you with a breakdown of respondents by nationality, school, or level of study. It's up to you how you choose to personalize the response rate dashboard. It's a really useful tool as it will help you to send targeted reminders and hopefully increase your response rate. Something else we've implemented within our 2020 ISB and SB survey is a number of questions from our COVID-19 response barometer. And this is to allow institutions to continue to measure and track student satisfaction with their response to COVID-19. I'm now going to hand over to Robin, who will be speaking about the COVID-19 response barometer.
Thank you very much, Mel. And now I'll be sharing my screen. As always, give me a shout.
Yeah, I've got it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Now, as appears to be the case with any webinar these days, I think it goes without saying we've got to have a section on COVID-19, so that's my bit today. And also, when we were first looking at this conference, probably back in June, I was thinking that by the end of October, I'd be talking about COVID-19 in the past tense. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to have happened. Certainly not for us here in the UK. We're in the capable hands of Boris and his chums. Now, shortly after it all kicked off in March, I think it was March, it started to become clear this wasn't going to be a short-term issue. So Nick and Mel and the rest of the team got our heads together to think about what we could do to help the sector. And I guess because surveys is what we do, we produced a COVID-19 response barometer, which was aimed at higher education institutions here in the UK and overseas. It's a relatively short questionnaire, which, along with capturing some demographic data to aid analysis, covered items such as the overall satisfaction with an institution's response, communication, again, overall satisfaction with communication, but also satisfaction with the various elements of information and the frequency that information was going out. It asked about online learning, what activities are online, and again, the satisfaction with those elements. It looked ahead. We gathered information on things like exam timetables and the delays to exams, future desires for online face-to-face delivery, and also around concerns on completing their studies or graduating or continuing their studies due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Our participation was free of charge, although we did charge for customizations and additional reporting. Most institutions ran the survey for 2 to 4 weeks between May and the end of September. And in that time, we collected nearly 25,000 responses from 44 institutes. We had a nice spread of data around the globe, but the analysis we've done is focused on Australia, New Zealand, UK, Germany, and Malaysia. And in the first for us, participants received access to their results through a near live online dashboard. I say near live, it's updated every 4 hours. So users could log in via their InTouch account that Mel's just spoken about and access a Tableau-powered data visualization, which looked like this, which, as you can see, has a number of filters down the right-hand side. So with just a couple of clicks, a user could see how their results compared against an in-region or a global comparison, and then see how that varied by cohort. So again, you could filter by international or domestic, undergrad or postgrad, or year of study, etc. As you can see on that chart, it was quite a comprehensive dashboard covering, say, most areas of the survey. So as you can imagine, we've collected lots of data over these past few months, and to get the ball rolling on the analysis, we took an extract of that data at the end of August. So although the survey ran a bit longer, we took a snapshot then to start doing some data analysis. And I'm going to share some of these findings with you today. So whilst results are most useful at the institutional level, we can draw some quite interesting indicative country comparisons between the 5 focus countries covered in the survey. And I want to be transparent here and say we did struggle with getting responses that we would normally see in the ISB, the Student Barometer Survey. So for each region, we're looking at total responses that were in the thousands from 5 or 7 universities per country. So whilst it's okay, it's far from ideal, but still bigger numbers than many of the surveys that are quoted in the press. Now, I've got a few of these charts coming up you can see now. And quite simply, the blue is a proportion of respondents who answered satisfied or very satisfied to a particular question. And pink is the proportion of students that answered dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. Each horizontal bar refers to a region, global at the top. So as you can see there, in terms of overall satisfaction with their institution's response to COVID-19, students at German institutions were most likely to be satisfied, with an impressive 85% of students satisfied or very satisfied. This was notably above the global score of 70%, you can see at the top, and way above the UK score at 60% at the bottom there. Now, if we're looking at communication, students at German institutions were also most likely to be satisfied with the communication from their institution in response to COVID-19, with almost 9 out of 10 students, 87%, indicating that they were satisfied or very satisfied. This compared to around 8 out of 10 students being satisfied or very satisfied with communication from institutions in Malaysia, Australia, New Zealand, and 7 out of 10 in the UK. Following the overall communication question, we wanted to know a little more about the various aspects of information being communicated. At the global level, institutions were most likely to have done a good job of providing their students with advice on physical health, nearly 90%, either satisfied or very satisfied, well-being support, 81%, travel restrictions at 79%. However, students were least likely to have been satisfied with information on financial support at 58%. This followed a relatively similar pattern across the different countries, although I've highlighted here where students in Germany stand out again as having had notably higher satisfaction than students in other countries with information on teaching and learning elements, i.e. online learning resources, organisation of online lectures and tutorials, and organisation of tests and exams. Yet again, the UK is bringing up the tail in all aspects. As may be expected, given the speed at which many institutions had to adapt to online delivery, satisfaction with the online learning experience at their institution was slightly lower across the board. Around 2/3, 68%, of students globally were either satisfied or very satisfied. Following the same trend as the previous charts, this was highest among students at, well, not the UK anyway, Germany, 80%, followed by Malaysia, 75%, New Zealand, 72%, Australia, 69%. Again, UK at the bottom there, 56% satisfied with our online learning experience. So like we did for the communication question, we also asked a bit more detail about the online learning experience. And globally, around 7 out of 10 students were satisfied or very satisfied with lectures and tutorials, online learning resources and library facilities, tests and exams. Satisfaction levels were lower with assignments and group work, 62%. There was, however, considerable variation across countries, with the highest results being shared across Germany and New Zealand. Yet again, the UK bringing up the tail there. And given the disruption and uncertainty faced by students this year, it's not surprising that at a global level, concern amongst students about continuing their further studies or completing their course or graduating was quite high. Nearly 2/3 stating they were concerned or very concerned. What is interesting, though, is the difference in level of concern by country. In New Zealand, the majority of students, 54%, reported being not concerned or not at all concerned. While at the other end of the spectrum, in the UK, the vast majority, 76%, 3/4, indicated that they were concerned or very concerned. And as highlighted in light blue, the key concern about COVID-19 amongst students was physical and mental health risks. This rang true for most of our focus regions, except Australia, where it was completing my studies on time, and the UK, which has had impact on my future career. Whereas the second area of concern, impact on my future career at the global level, varied somewhat by focus country across physical and mental health risks, for Australia and the UK, impact on future career, Malaysia and New Zealand, and funding my studies in Germany. Now, the questions that we asked have been refined a little bit to reflect some feedback and maintain relevance. And as Mel has previously shown, these are now introduced or can be included as part of your next survey. This is already in place for the barometer that's just started running now across the Northern Hemisphere. And I'll be interested to see how the student experience has changed over these last 6 chaotic months. So thank you all for listening for that section. I hope that some of the figures I've quoted are of interest and perhaps add a little context if you run your own COVID surveys. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to post a question in the chat area and we'll do our best to answer. Hopefully we can just start a little Q&A session. And alternatively, if you want some time to digest what we've said, don't hesitate to send any questions through to us via email. Mel, if you could put your contact details into the chat box, and likewise we'll include it in the presentation pack that we'll send around via Elise or Jane. So again, if anyone has any questions, please post them in the chat room, or hopefully there's a Q&A section. If you can't see the Q&A section, could you put it in chat, please?
At the moment, I'm seeing no questions in the question and answer section, and also none in the chat.
That's fine. People will get 15 to 20 minutes back of their day.
We've either been extremely comprehensive or very dull. It's one of the two. But I'm a natural optimist. I'm going to opt for the former.
That's all right. There's something in the Q&A now. Thank you. Some comments.
Okay.
Not back in there, no. I suppose in terms of, it's a question from Brian. Some of the biggest challenges for faculty have been handling hybrid teaching, mixed online, offline. Did you ask about this? The two groups of students have different expectations. Not in the survey back in then, because obviously the survey ran at the end of May, and I think certainly the change to online, I suppose wasn't helped by the guidance or lack of guidance given here in the UK. So whilst we've got information regarding whether they prefer online or face-to-face, there wasn't questions asked specifically on hybrid teaching as such. In the student environment that's running now, we've changed enhanced our sort of the routing. So when we use the demographic data, we get an understanding whether you're an online student, how much of your studies are online, whether you are online because you wanted to be online in the first place, or whether you are online because you've been forced to go online because of COVID-19 as well. So that should give us a lot more data to start to see if we're getting differences in those kind of different teaching aspects. We've also got a much bigger section on online learning. So with the ISB as it used to stand, that was very much geared around face-to-face learning, and now we've obviously got a whole lot of questions around the online learning experience. So with a combination of the demographic data, we should be able to get some better information on that hybrid activities. Yeah, and we just did an analysis. I don't think it's gone out yet on our website on the COVID-19 data, because I just talked about the COVID-19 data. When I talked about like Germans, it was students, either German students or international students studying in Germany. So it's just all students that responded to that survey. When we've analysed the data, looking at is there any difference between international students and domestic students in terms of the COVID-19 response, satisfaction is generally a lot higher in the international students across most aspects of the survey. So the expectations were different, and they do seem to be more satisfied than domestic students, irrespective of the country that they were in. So in the UK, it always seemed to be a fair bit lower than global. Thank you.
I think we may have a question coming up in the chat panel from Perry, or he's just reporting connection difficulty.
Well, hopefully, Perry, the session's been recorded, so if you if there's bits of the answer of a question that we've just missed out, then hopefully you can either pick it up via the recording that the ICE will share with you.
Okay, I think that's great. Probably a last call for questions. Give you five seconds to type something, but if not, and I think that probably wraps us up, doesn't it? Okay.
Oh,
no, here's one. Some quick fingers there typing that. So this is John Daly. Where do you see the future of rankings going with you? So
as in, are we going to keep them? I think we're going to keep them for the short term. I can't see like everyone's dropping down, but in terms of satisfaction, is it going to be lower this year? Probably is. We haven't, the surveys, our student barometer surveys just started running. Are they all going to drop at the same rate? Don't know. We'll probably find out in the next sort of 3 months. I can't say that whether, here in the UK, whether things like Russell Group or established universities or what do you call them? The collegiate universities are going to fare better than others. I honestly don't know. Who knows what the next sort of 6 months is going to bring us. So we'll start to get some interesting data out as the data's coming in over the next 3 months with the student barometer survey. So if you keep an eye on our tribalgroup.com or igraduate.org websites, you'll see some blogs coming out with some sort of relatively live data, which will be sort of firing out.
Just a useful comment from Craig there. We should perhaps just read that out to make sure everyone's got it. So many institutions have pressures on data analysis capability. Can you provide some advice on where the institution should focus in using the ISBSB data under these circumstances?
That's the problem. I think you would get this kind of focus, getting some capacity to look at the data. Because one of the things yeah, go on.
Is that question about sort of which deliverable is the best one to look at? I mean, I think I'll just speak to my own personal experience. Whenever I'm presenting back to an institution, then my starting point is always the ranking sheet. So I showed you a small excerpt just looking at the arrival section today, but that is actually a much bigger sheet. It's, it always needs printing off on A3, and what that gives you is a really good snapshot overview of what to focus on in more detail, because you've got all your color-coded rankings on the right. So if you just want to focus on the negatives, you shouldn't just focus on the negatives, because there's some good stuff on there, but often we do. So just pick your 10 or so or 15 or so red questions and start to look at them in a bit more detail. I think if we're addressing the issue of a lack of data analysis capacity, then start with the ranking sheet, and then I would go, or you can almost ignore the other deliverables, and once you've got a small hang of the pivot table, and that is just a matter, to be honest, of looking at the recording of this session, my bit on the pivot table, that will pretty much do you. That's about the level of expertise you need. You'll start to get the hang of it quite quickly. So ranking sheet first, pick your focus areas, then go and have a look at them on the pivot table. And that will get you a long way towards some very decent breakdowns of your data.
Recommendation score is clearly key. That's basically the driver for future success. I mean, we see in all the global data that people are an important element of a student's decision making. So be that family, friends, recommendation scores. That's really, really important. So again, if you can understand the relationship between, you've got obviously those matrix charts. I think they're called the importance charts for the eyes. Forgive me. We can correlate the information between a satisfaction score in a particular element and the student's recommendation score. So if you've got a score which is particularly high or particularly low, and it's got a strong correlation to recommendation, they're the ones that you need to look at. So they're going to have the biggest influence on recommendation score, and therefore will probably affect enrollment numbers going forward. So it's identifying those elements that have got a strong relationship with recommendation, which is done by those matrix charts. I don't know if you've been provided those yet for this last session or last survey wave.
Okay, yes, they've got all the raw data. Okay. I think we've already had a final call for questions, so I'm not going to extend that invitation again. Jane, I know that you're on top of the recording of the session. I'm working on the assumption that once we all leave the session, then the recording will automatically stop itself, and you'll then be able to circulate that. But thank you ever so much, everyone, for your time on today's session. I hope it was really, really useful. We're getting a few bits of feedback that says it was, so that's good to hear. But all that remains, I think, is to say have a good evening, rest of day, morning, whatever. Just enjoy yourselves. That's it from us. Thank you very much for your time.